Hey, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Princeton Public Library here on Zoom, a virtual presentation that we're doing today. And I'm Janie Herman, the Public Programming Librarian here at Princeton Public Library. And I am really thrilled to be here with Beth and Jonathan Evans, who are world-renowned batik artists. And they have just published with Blue Ear Books a Book of Batik, which is their collected works of their career. It's a chronological story of how they got into batik, how they met, and their lives together, creating batik and teaching and traveling the world together. It's a beautiful, wonderful book. It's a true collector's book. So I'm going to let Ethan Casey take it from here for a moment. I have known Ethan now for over 15 years. We met through the TEDx platform, and over the years, I've hosted several of the wonderful authors that Ethan has published. His small publishing house, Blue Ear Books, really does great work. And I'm always thrilled to welcome Blue Ear Books and Ethan here to Princeton Public Library, whether it's in person, he's often been in our community room, or on Zoom. It's always a joy. So I'm going to let Ethan, Beth, and Jonathan take it away to tell us all about batik. I'm going to be behind the scenes. Now, anybody on here with us live, if you have questions, you can pop it in the Q&A or just write into the chat, and I'll be moderating from behind the scenes the chat. So be sure to ask questions because there will be a Q&A at the end. And I think we are ready to go. Take it away.
All right. Yeah, thank you, Janie. It's always a pleasure for me too to do anything with the Princeton Public Library. Janie's a great friend and of me and anything I suggest to her, she's always receptive. I'm delighted to that Janie was the one that suggested this session, and I'm delighted that we're able to do this. And I think the virtual setting is perfect for it because it's going to be mostly a slideshow. It's a little bit of a doing this book was a little bit of a stretch for Blue Ear Books. We publish mostly on international topics and usually topical topics. And Jonathan and Beth's story is very international, and there's a lot about living in the world in their book and in the images, of course. It's a wonderful blend of images and narrative text. It's a life story. It's a dual autobiography and an art book at the same time. And it also, I was delighted with how well printed and really beautifully presented it turned out to be. And a lot of that is down to the design work of Sean Robertson, who's a really very good book designer based in Cape Town, South Africa. I'm here really just to nudge the conversation forward at Jonathan's insistence. He's a great storyteller, and sometimes he storytells at great length. So if that ends up happening, I may nudge him in a different direction for the sake of time. But let's just get started. This is Jonathan and Beth's show, and I'm here to nudge. And I'm just delighted that you guys are here and that you can share your work in this way.
Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ethan.
And we couldn't have done this without you, of course. And there is Sean.
Hey, Sean.
The book designer is here, showing
At
up
some-
late at
well,
night.
Yeah, welcome, Sean. At some point, I'll ask you to just say a few words. Let's get started with Jonathan and Beth, and then at some point,
Okay.
Sean can speak to the
All
design.
right. Well, I guess we'll talk about. So this is the cover of the book, and this is one of my batiks of the West Spanish Peak, which we live at the base of here in La Veta, Colorado, in southern Colorado. And the picture next to it is Jonathan and me in India, in North India, quite a while ago.
On a trek.
On a trek, yeah.
It's,
Okay, so we'll get this out of the way. This is a basic demo of how batik is done before we start talking about batik for anybody that doesn't know. So the first image, so in that I have done a drawing with graphite on cotton cloth, white cotton cloth, and I am waxing over where I want the cloth to stay white. And so I have a wax pot, and the tool in my hand is called either a chanting or a canting, depending on who you are, who's talking about it. And so the batik is done with wax resist. So the number 2, I've already waxed the white on the sunflower that I'm making, and I'm dipping it in yellow dye. So wherever the wax has been applied, the dye won't soak in. So you see in number 3, the cloth has been washed and dried, and I'm waxing over where I want to keep yellow. And you can see there the white has been preserved. After the yellow is waxed, I put it in turquoise, which, because it's going over yellow in the unwaxed areas, has gone green. So then we have yellow and a green background. So there in number 5, after it's been rinsed and dried, I'm waxing over where I want to keep the green. And then I've put it in fuchsia. And the fuchsia over the green has made this kind of terracotta color in number 7, which I'm then waxing over. Then I've put it in green. So the green over the terracotta has made this brown in number 9, which I'm then waxing over. And then the piece is put in black, which was the final color. So everything on there has been waxed and preserved except for the final darkest color, which is the black. So that's a very kind of simple, basic batik.
Yeah.
And then we get the wax off by popping the batik into boiling water, and the wax melts off straight away.
Yeah, you can boil it, or sometimes with the really large, complicated pieces, we'll take it to a dry cleaner.
So this chart with explanatory text is right near the beginning of the book, and I found it really useful because I knew nothing about any of this before we published this book, and it's just sort of, when you look at the images, some of which are amazingly intricate and complicated, it's helpful just to have a sense of the process. Let's look at the next one.
Yeah. This is one of my first batiks, probably in about 1989 or so, and it's a juniper tree outside of my window in Colorado, and you can see it's a kind of limited color palette. I did only immersion dyeing then, and was just learning. So you can go on.
Next.
Okay,
Jonathan.
This is one of my early pieces. I was living in Ibiza, which is in Spain, where I started doing batik. And I had already got into a kind of representational style. And I was working for a co-op gallery boutique called Happy Valley. And I did a huge number of wraparound skirts. They were great big pieces of cloth. This was Happy Valley. It was kind of a very fanciful version of our community in Ibiza, living out in the country on top of mountains, a simple life with no electricity, no running water, and a kind of magic.
Give a sense, Jonathan, of how long ago that was. You're a few years older than Beth.
I started doing this in 1970. I was like 26 when I first started. I'd learned how to do batik as a school teacher, but I didn't really get serious about it till I left England and went to live in Spain and started batiking as a way to earn a living.
Now, at some point, we'll get to how the two of you met, which is a great story. For now, let's move on to the next slide. Well, or while we're doing that, how did you two? One of you guys tell the story of how you met.
Oh, okay. You go ahead.
Okay. We moved on.
Go ahead and tell the story, Will.
Shall I tell the story very fast? I was living in India, batiking. This was in 2002. Beth was in Colorado. I got an email from this young woman in Colorado saying, "Oh, I'm a batik artist. Also, I saw your portraits online. How do you do it?" So, okay. I didn't have electricity. I didn't have constant email. For a year, we talked, Beth and I. We went a little bit beyond batik, but we talked a lot about batik.
Yeah,
we talked about
travel. Lots of emailing.
Finally, we ended up both flying to London and met at Heathrow Airport, a blind date. We luckily hit it off. spent 2 weeks together. Beth went back to Colorado. I packed up India and followed her over, and that was like 22 years ago now. We've just celebrated our 21st wedding anniversary last week, actually.
Yeah.
Anyway, nice story.
There you go. Tell us about this
Glad to
batik.
have it out of the way.
Yeah.
It's one of my early Ibiza batiks, and it was quite an important one at the time, in that I was doing all immersion dyeing. That was putting the whole cloth into a pot of dye, and I learned to do gradation dyeing, which I had to kind of figure out for myself, which in this case was dyeing the cloth yellow. It was white cloth, did my drawing, dyed it yellow, waxed over the bottom of the yellow. Then I put it slowly into blue dye and drew it out slowly, so that where the blue came over the yellow, it went green, and then the longer it was in the dye, the bluer it got. So that was the sky. I waxed it all over, 2 browns at the bottom, waxed it over, and let the black silhouette delineate the trees. It seems kind of simple now, but at the time, I learned a lot from this piece.
Yeah. Yeah. Next slide.
Oh, me again. Okay, well, we're jumping into Colorado here. We're all over the place. This is, again, like the cover of the book, West Peak, which is a volcanic peak, which overshadows our little arty mountain town of Levita.
And there's the east and the west Spanish peak.
There's an east and a west. This is a farm nearby. And you can see on the left-hand side a wall, a dark shadowed wall, which originally was the lava flowing from the peak down in all directions. These walls are in all directions from the West Peak, and we call them the walls.
They're dikes.
Dikes. Beth calls them dikes. I call them walls. I'm more politically correct than she is, I think. Okay,
Go ahead.
we can move on.
Okay.
Okay, this is I did this piece maybe 8 or 9 years ago, and this is after I started doing pointillism, so it's dots of wax over layers and layers of color. So I figure there's probably about 160, 170,000 dots in this piece. I took a square inch, counted the dots, and multiplied. So this is something I've been working on for quite a few years, as the pointillism technique. I see this as one of the best batiks I ever did. I really feel.
Beth, how long does it take to do?
Yeah.
How long does it take to do 160,000 dots?
A long time. Like that one took me it was weeks and weeks of pretty steady work. I don't like to get into doing a really complicated batik like this unless I have a good chunk of time where I'm not going to get a lot of interruptions, because I really lose track if I take too much time off and while I'm still working on it. So yeah, this took me a few weeks.
She cranks up the music in the studio, boom, 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 and dots, 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 like this. It's like performance art to watch.
Yeah. It's amazing. Let's see the next one.
And this is also a quite early piece of mine. I had taken a photo of a guitar player, but I took him and I put him in a city kitchen, and it's kind of a fanciful piece that I made up, and I was trying to create a mood, and I hope I did. And again, you see the color palette is quite simple, because later on I learned to maybe dye particular areas if I wanted more color. At this point, I was still doing all immersion dyeing.
So how many colors have you got there? Like 10?
Well, it started with, so it was white and cream and the pale blue. And then I went into did I go into a darker blue and then into the reds?
And black is your last color. The black always unifies the light and dark. The contrast kind of unifies. our art at the end, I think.
Mhm.
I just don't
Sometimes we use 100 dyes. This is a relatively simple
Mhm.
one.
simple but effective.
Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, I just saw a question in the chat that's a little timely. The previous one, the leaf picture. Somebody asked how big was that? What are the dimensions of that piece?
This one?
No,
Oh, the
yeah, that's
previous
one.
one.
The
Oh,
pointless.
the pointless one, and that one's quite large. So I think it was about I think it's probably like, I'm trying to remember, maybe 24 by 36, something like that.
We work large often.
Yeah.
Okay, let's keep it rolling.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go to the next one. Yeah. Another pointillist.
Another pointillism piece. So this is a still life I set up. That particular checkered cloth has been in a lot of our batiks. And this one also was quite challenging because you can see like with the shadows and the cloth. So where it's light, I did pale yellow, and of course where it's uh, dark, I did the darker yellow in the little squares. And so anyway, that one was quite a mind-bending one to do.
It is very complex.
Yeah.
As good as you get, Beth.
Next one,
Okay,
please.
let's.
Yeah.
Okay, this is I lived in Ibiza for 10 years, and then I left and came to New York. This was 1978 when I first came to the States. I was living in Manhattan in Times Square. I used to go past the Shopson's grocery store every day, and went in one day, and Kenny and Evie Shopson suddenly became great friends of mine. And they asked me to do their family portrait, which I did. This was number one. It was a weird shop full of old signs and kids crawling around in the food, and it was like it wasn't the healthiest. Most, I don't know how to describe the Shopsons. They actually became legends and famous later when they made a film about them called "I Like Killing Flies." It was called.
And they were
Anyway,
written. Yeah.
I did this batik for them, gave it to them. They loved it. They sent it off to Brooklyn to be framed. Somehow, on the way back, the painting got stolen. Okay, a year went by. Kenny came to me, and you can go on to the second picture now, Janie. Asked me to do the whole thing again, which I did. And in the interim year, they'd had twins, and there they are again. I always think the first one was the better one. The colors are a little stronger, but it was kind of funny how they became celebrities. Kenny went on to open a restaurant in New York. He died quite recently. Evie's still alive. And Tamara, one of the twins, I guess, is now a famous artist in her own right.
She got the cover of a recent issue of the New York Review of Books, and that was.
Yeah, I've written to her and not going to reply, but I'll chase her.
We'll have to write to her again.
I will.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's look at the next
So
one.
this is an early 1970, 1980 portrait of mine.
Yeah. Next slide.
Okay, we're jumping forward again to West Virginia. I'd had a few adventures in between New York and West Virginia, like Florida and California and Chicago, and I ended up totally broke in West Virginia, where I did some of my very best work. This was as good as I got in that period. I call it crayfishing in America. It was a couple of kids catching crayfish, which are kind of river freshwater lobsters of some kind. I wouldn't really know. I'm a vegetarian. But anyway, it had a kind of very traditional American huckleberry fin feel for me. And there they are standing in the water, quite a complex Betty, lots of colors, and
Yeah.
it's a good one.
Is this one large, Jonathan?
Yes, well, I actually don't know what happened to it. I don't really remember doing it even. Somebody bought it along the way, and I'm sure it was large. Yeah, it was a large vista that I was dealing with.
Yeah. Next, please.
And this is from about maybe 15 years ago. We were in Goa, India, and I came upon this scene and took photographs. I saw somebody asked what we worked from. It varies. Sometimes we're working from photographs we take. In fact, when I'm taking photographs, it's all about with batik in mind, usually. And sometimes it's just out of my head, and there'll be some pieces coming up. This one is from a photograph, and so the lettering is always very challenging on that one. And I don't know, I just thought it was perfect with the purple bicycle and the signage and the woman in the doorway there.
One of the striking things in the book is there are many batiks from India in the book, and it seems like you can just point your camera at anything in India and you're going to find an interesting assortment of
It's a
things.
colorful place. It's a colorful place.
Yeah.
We find a lot of subject matter there.
Yeah, urban as well as
Yeah.
in Himalaya and temples. Let's look at the next one.
We never know what's coming next. Oh, this
No,
is
that's
much.
right.
This is very recent. So this is we took a trip to Paris a couple of years ago, and this is called Saint Denis Pigeon, and it was right near where we were staying there. And this was a challenge too, to have it come across that is a reflection of a building in the puddle with the pigeon, and then to make it clear, where the sidewalk is underwater and where it's not. And so, if you can see on there where it's underwater, I've done no black in there, it's all blue. And then when it comes out in the corner there where it's not underwater anymore, I put more black in. So and then to carry it on into the shadow of the pigeon. And anyway, that was a very challenging piece that I'm quite proud of.
Yeah.
I think that would be hard to do in oil paints or in acrylics, and in batik, but it's quite amazing. It's technically incredibly accomplished.
I saw another question that came up about how did we get started in it, which we didn't explain. And so I have to say, I was doing hand painted clothing in the 80s. I had a shop in Cachera, Colorado, which is about 12 miles from here. And no, I didn't have any formal art training. I took a lot of workshops in a lot of different mediums through my whole life, and drawing was always a hobby of mine. I got the shop. I started doing the hand painted clothing, and then I started doing some dyeing of the clothing. And then I thought, what is that thing I did in 7th grade art class with the wax? And I couldn't even remember what it was called, but I melted some candles and I started playing with it, and I just fell in love with it immediately. So that's where I got started with it. And Jonathan has another story.
I've got another story. I was a school teacher before I was an artist. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. My degree was in fine arts. I was teaching primary kids, and one of the other teachers in the school came in from a trip to Malaysia, and he had a little piece of cloth, and it had a landscape on it, very simple, a house, a bridge, a river, a guy crossing the bridge. I can remember it clearly. And he said, this is called batik. They do it with wax and dyes. And I looked at it and I looked at it and clicked. Something straight away came to me, and I figured out how batik worked, how you separated the colors, how you dye from light to dark, and so on. So I did it with the kids, and we did peace signs, white peace signs on black t-shirts, and skulls and crossbones, very simple stuff, melting candle wax. Enjoyed it. The staff at the school complained about the smell of the wax everywhere, so it didn't last very long, and I forgot about it. And then, of course, 2 or 3 years later, I went to live in Spain, had to come up with a new career, tried all kinds of different art things. I have no formal training whatsoever, though I've always drawn and I've always loved art. I made a batik shirt. It sold instantly. I made 6 more. They sold instantly, and it's kind of gone from there. So it's been like naked financial greed, which has driven me along in my quest for artistic perfection.
And you've built your multinational.
What went wrong?
I was going to say you've built your multinational empire from there. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, let's move on.
Look at the next one.
That's a very good batik.
Yeah.
This is another very early one. They're all mixed up. So I love doing still lifes. I love setting them up. I have a lot of knickknacks and things to set up. And this one was interesting because it is, and I look at it and I think, how did I do it? And it was just it was all immersion dyeing, and to get all those colors with just the immersion dyeing is kind of a feat. Because if that blue had just been a little bit darker, I would have never got that orange and red. And you could see in this one, there's a lot of kind of smudgy look to it. And you could see it. And I think I did it purposely in this somewhat, because I see a shadow behind the glass, the vase. But that's what happens when the wax isn't totally penetrated in the piece. And there's always also some cracking you can see there. And that's something that happens with batik that's very indicative of it, because when the wax is cooled, of course, it's brittle and it cracks. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's not. Sometimes it can obscure the image and other times it adds to it. And we always like to do a little cracking because we feel like it unifies the piece. And we use it cracking also if it's tree limbs and things.
I don't know if Beth explained that quite
Okay,
correctly, but the wax being brittle cracks and the dye gets
the dye gets in the cracks,
and it gives batik its very characteristic look, which is a kind of veined cracking look. And
you'll see more than other.
You'll see. Sometimes I manage to avoid it altogether. Yeah. If I'm doing a portrait, I do not want cracking all over the face. Sometimes it enhances the painting. I like a little bit. Sometimes it unifies it. So, but it is very typical of batik. It's kind of what people think of when they think of batik. Sometimes people overdo it and they obscure a perfectly good drawing. So I think,
and I have to say another thing on this that I remember that doing with this is that I was playing around with partially melting wax out with a wood burning tool, and I see that now on the bowls. So I did this so long ago, I'm forgetting. So I did some partial wax removal with the wood burning tool to make that shading, and it's a rather haphazard way to do it, but I
turned out great.
Yeah, I never tried that. That's something.
No, you didn't try that.
No. Okay, let's go. Okay, New York, back to New York, 1978, 1980. I did a lot of New York scenes, architectural facades and so on, and I did a series of Central Park batiks, one for each season. This was fall in Central Park, I remember. This piece actually isn't in the book, is it, Ethan? Come to think of it.
No,
but
it's not.
I want to include some New York work.
We'll do another book and include all the pieces.
The second book.
Yeah, compromises.
Yeah, that's right. Next.
I mean, actually, it was very hard to choose 50 pieces each from 5,000. Yeah, this was jumping ahead again to West Virginia, living out in the country, very primitive, simple life I had. A wood-burning stove was my only heating, and me and a neighbor used to go out and pull down trunks of tree trunks using his cart horse and chop them up for firewood. I always like the way the horse seems to come straight out of the picture at you. It's I mean, it's quite a complex drawing. Good drawing.
Yeah. Next, please.
This is Jonathan's house in India that he lived in for 25 years, going back and forth to the UK and things. And this is in northern India near a town called Almora. And I lived there with him for about 4 years total. And this is the first batik we collaborated on.
She drew from the left, I drew from the right. I think we met with me sitting here.
And then we batiked in the middle. We switched and batiked it. So, and we put Jonathan there.
So. Still have the house. The neighbor next door, his family has taken it over and is living there right now. We haven't been there for
a few years
mm-hmm. since COVID, actually, mm-hmm. but I've got nothing but wonderful memories of this. And
It's a multi,
we still have the batik. We've kept it.
you can see it's a multi-level house on a hillside with really kind of with trapdoors and ladders, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there's some 1, 2, 3, 4,
Four,
5
5.
levels, this house.
Yeah.
And inside you get down from the top to the bottom with trapdoors and ladders inside the house. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And then the garden here had wonderful
Yeah.
gladiolas and ganja.
And then here is the down at the center and the bottom is the spring ran into that tank. So we had no running water inside, but there was a spring out there.
No electricity either. But I've lived a lot of my life without
You did?
electricity.
Hmm.
Anyway, and it's still a nice piece.
That's beautiful.
I always wish I'd put a painting of Beth at the top window. That was the thing that got missed out of that one.
Next, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, now we're jumping ahead.
Now we're jumping all over the place
Who's
again.
going to talk about Haiti?
We do a lot of volunteer work abroad. We like holidays with a mission. And one of our most successful missions was going to Haiti several times and setting up the Haitian Batik project. We taught a bunch of local women in a town called Gonaïve in the northwest of the island how to do batik. We did workshops with them, showed them how to do simple waxing and dyes, and they really got into it. And they did scarves. They were very into it and very good. And this was Odette, who was one of the women who worked in the group with us. And I don't know, always thought she had a very striking face. I always thought also that a good portrait, doesn't matter if you know the person or not, or where it's from, if it's a good portrait, somebody will want it, and somebody wanted this one.
Next, please.
This is a very recent piece I've done. There's a place near us called Red Wing, Colorado, and this is an old adobe ruin there. And so this I just did last year, and it's now living in Virginia.
Great colors. Love the colors. I personally love the tones in the background, the teal and olive and black and blue all mixed together. I mean, the colors
I think what attracted me with the blue shadows on the side.
This is a good moment, I think, for me to jump in for just a minute, because part of the great pleasure for me as Jonathan and Beth's publisher is that Levita, where they live, is a town that I'm familiar with. It's personal to me and my family, and we've spent a lot of time there over many years. And so seeing these Colorado landscapes and scenes like this are sentimental for me, and it's beautiful that Beth and Jonathan render them so well. This project happened. I mentioned at the beginning that this book is a bit of a departure for Blue Air Books. I'm a words guy. I'm an editor. For me, books means words, and I'm good with words, and I'm less comfortable with images. And the long story short is that my wife and I happened into their gallery, I think 3 summers ago, and within about a minute, Jonathan and I were launched on what turned out to be an hour-long conversation about adventures worldwide and our shared interest in Haiti, and then that led to a friendship and among the 4 of us, and then the friendship led to this book. Jonathan and Beth are both very good writers. They're both very, very good storytellers, and Jonathan has written a lot, and on request he will write a lot. And part of the challenge was, as he alluded, not only making really difficult decisions about what images to include, but how to tell the stories as well. I think this book is a unique blend of personal narrative, dual autobiography, and it's also very much an art book. So I'm gonna hand it over for just a minute to Sean Robertson, because he was crucial to this project, and I'd like Sean just to talk for a minute about how the book was put together as a layout project with the blend of text and art. Sean is a very good book designer, based in Cape Town, South Africa, and given that I had no experience with art books before this project, his involvement in it was crucial to it turning out the way it did. So welcome, Sean. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Thanks very much, guys. Pleasure to be here. Yeah, this was a great project to work on. It was just so smooth, and it's always nice to work on an art book because you get to see such beautiful artworks, and you know it's a pleasure to work on something where you get given so many beautiful visuals that you can just make big. And I always believe that when you get given big, beautiful pictures, whether they're photographs or paintings or artworks, whatever they may be, it's nice for those things to let them tell the story. So you don't have to do anything additional to the design. Those should be the champions or the heroes on every single page. So it was just a pleasure. It's such a great book to be a part of. And it was, like I said, it was a smooth process from the beginning to the end. It was just a pleasure to work on. Absolute pleasure. So yeah.
Yeah, it was just wonderful to have this little team, and everybody understood what we were trying to accomplish, and we pulled it off.
It was really, and it really went very smoothly, and it was fun. It was mostly fun, you know. And I want to thank both of you, and Sean, you did such a fabulous job, and I'm so glad you finally got your book that I mailed 3 months ago.
Things take a while in South Africa to arrive.
Yeah.
It's kind of, we just sent a book to Indonesia in 4 days.
Oh,
wow.
It took you 3 months to get it in Cape Town. How do you explain that, man?
Yeah. It's a miracle it arrived, I'll be honest with you. Our post office, it's a bit of a...
I was getting worried because, in fact, it was just 2 days ago that I checked to see if it had gotten there, and it said no, and I thought, do I need to send another one? But I'm glad you got it.
yeah.
Just quickly, I really liked what Sean did. He left lots of white space. It wasn't all packed in. There are pages.
It's beautifully done.
Whole large pieces occupy 2 pages, and his spacing and the use of space is what made this book so unusual and so special. I think it really, you did a great job, Sean. I would never have thought of doing it like that, and you made this book. Thank you.
We would have crammed it in there.
Yeah.
Let's look at the last few images. Oh, sorry, Sean. Go ahead, Sean.
I was going to say thank you very much. It's very kind of you guys. It's awesome working with you too. So yeah, I'm so glad everything turned out well and everyone's happy with the end result.
Yeah, we all are. Let's look at the next one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, that's my water lilies from I think it says 2004, and this one's in a high school art textbook, so they chose that for the example of batik, so that was quite an honor.
Quite a complex piece, man.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And this was at the National Botanical Garden in DC?
This was
or Maryland?
Yes, it was at the at the Arboretum.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was at the Arboretum in DC. So so I grew up in Maryland. So I still have family there. And so when I go back, I play tourist. And so I have quite a bit of subject matter from there too.
Yeah. Next, please.
This is from my first year in India. This was it was monsoon season, so we were kind of stuck indoors. That's our pet crow sitting out there. And so I was sitting in the kitchen of the India house, and I was looking out the door and drawing. And this is what I came up with. And so there you can see one of the ladders that goes. So the ladder that went up to the bedroom there on the left. And there's our shoes on the mat. This one I really is very sentimental to me, and this is the kind of the one I wish I'd never sold, and because it is so sentimental, and I look back on it just with such fond memories. And that has you could see a lot of cracking in that one,
but it adds to it.
It adds to it because it's an old, an old house. The walls were kind of cracking.
Yeah, and it was all cracking.
It was all cracking.
Yeah, next, please. That's a beautiful one. That's one of my favorites.
I love that one.
Yeah.
Okay, this is again at the house in India. We didn't have any furniture. We used to live on the floor. Beth is a silver flautist, though she never plays anymore, but she used to, classical music. And I drew her one day. There's my guitar in the background. She's sitting on the floor. She's got a sheet music around her. Very hard bit of batik to do, especially the sheet music. I'm mind boggled looking at it, thinking how I actually managed that. I think I changed the color of her clothes, perhaps, on it. And she was short-haired, crew-cut, blondie Beth at this point, I can see.
And then that's where, I don't know if you'll remember, in that still life I did, I said that checkered cloth had made it into a lot of batiks. So there it is in the corner there.
Top left-hand corner. Yeah, we've used that a lot of that. I batik faux textiles using that cloth.
Yeah.
What happened to this, Betty? Did we have it?
It's mine.
Oh, I gave it to you.
Yeah.
Okay, I went through a phase of being obsessively OCD, is all I can say looking at it. I did some faux textiles, which were drawings of bits of the more complex, the better cloth that I found, and this was houndstooth. And I'm just trying to give a 3D effect to a 2D painting. And I couldn't do it. I don't know what I was thinking about at all when I did it. It was a different genre.
I don't know how many are left. Let's give a little time to whichever ones are left. The next one's striking too. It's there's a story there.
And we are getting questions, so let's push on with this and get to the questions. This was a late one of mine, done I suppose about 4 or 5 years ago. My first cell phone, which was kind of mind-boggling to me. I'm always a generation behind. It took me a long time to get a cell phone. This was me holding up the cell phone in a bathroom mirror and seeing images of myself in all directions. I gave it to Helen Godden, who's an Australian quilter. She quilted it for me, so it was quilted all over. And it won 3rd prize at the International Quilt Show in Houston, Texas, the same year. I call it identity crisis because I'm obviously pretty confused. I think I'm a kind of hood from 1930, apparently, with the cell phone, and I look baffled.
Next one, please.
You want to do that?
Oh, yeah. So this is one in progress. So I did these 2 bird and bamboo wall hangings as a commission for a woman in a local woman. And so you'll see on the bottom left, I'm waxing over that gold background, and you can see where I'm leaving the bamboo leaves unwaxed, which then took blue, which made green. And I think the top left is when just the bird and the bamboo stalks were done.
And we did a screen together.
We did a similar
with the same drawing, didn't we? A 4-part screen, upright screen.
Yeah.
Nice.
Next, please.
Beth's. Oh, yeah, that's Almora, the town near where we live in India. And so this is actually from a photograph that Jonathan took of me going up an alley there with the dog going the other way. The dog didn't even pay me any attention. He was on his way somewhere. I exaggerated all the blues. I thought this is just going to be all blues. And so that's why it's called Blue Alley.
Yeah.
Good.
All right. And I love the perspective of it.
One of my favorite pieces of yours.
Next, please. I haven't seen this one.
I didn't know this one got in. This is Fearless Jonathan, aged, I don't know what, 40, 45 or something, living in Bali. I got this great job in Bali, working for an English rave clothes company called Loud. And they gave me a little factory and a whole crew of batiks to work with me. And I designed and batiked psychedelic clothes that they sold back in London. And this is me showing off a bit here, I guess, with a fractal shirt on.
Nice legs.
Nice. I was going to
Nice
say
legs, right?
good tan.
Please, let's get out away from that as quick as possible.
Okay, me again. The first quilt that I made, again working with Helen Godden. This little village we lived in India. I batiked nearly everybody in the village. I did 50 or 60 portraits of the local people, not realizing that in fact I was kind of recording a generation and an era which is gone now. I mean, they've got cell phones and TV. This was pre all that. I did a whole series of these portraits, which I showed separately. I sent them to a show in Malaysia, came back 2 years later, totally ruined, ripped and torn and stained and just throwaways.
Heartbreaking.
Helen Godden, the Australian quilter, came and did a class with us, and I showed them to her, and she said, "Oh, I can save these." I gave them to her. She took them away. She made this fabulous Faces of India quilt with them, which we still have. We showed it at the International Quilt Show in Houston and won first prize with it. I can tell you about every single person there, but there really isn't time. There's my postman, top right. There's the local town beggar. There's Sita in the middle, a father and son. Danu, top left, used to work for us. Harak Singh, who was a schizophrenic. I painted him 2 or 3 times in different states of despair. And Uncle, a retired academic at the bottom. So we still have this.
Yeah. Janie, how many pieces are left?
Not much.
We just have 2 left.
All right.
Only 2.
Let's
Oh,
do
okay.
that.
We've gone through. Okay. Well, living in Colorado, I do a lot of aspen trees. And aspens, you think that maybe they're just white, but they're not. They come in all different colors. And so this is one of the aspen trees. And like I said, I have done dozens and dozens and dozens of them. And I still enjoy doing them.
Yeah. They're very characteristic. They're very Colorado, and
Very Colorado.
Yes. Okay, last piece. This was 5 or 6 years ago. We went to the David Hockney show in London. We made a trip over to London to do it. And we went around all the museums, Tate Britain, the Tate Modern, the National Gallery, all of them. And this was, I call this pictures at an exhibition, and I've left the pictures deliberately a little obscure and abstract, but it's Beth standing in the middle of the room and looking at these paintings.
And as you say in the book, Jonathan, you can tell it's Beth just by her
It does
body.
look exactly like Beth, doesn't it? Her legs and her hair and her bag.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So we're going to go over to the Q&A, but just before we do, so this is the website where you can go and find out more about Jonathan and Beth. Shalawala, is that how you say it?
Yeah, and buy the book, yes. Shalawala.com, that's right.
Shalawala.com.
Shalawala.com.
And you can also go on over to Blue Ear Books. There's their website, blueearbooks.com. Find out other things that Ethan has published. You'll see other video. I think there's another video on there that was done at the library recently when Ethan was in New Jersey. So that's blueearbooks.com and Shalawala. I'm going to stop screen sharing. We do have some questions here. Hang on a second. Let's see. It'll just make it easier for me to manage the queue. Okay. So I'm looking in the question and answer section first, and Julia wants to know, why do a color over color and try to predict the color versus wax everything but the one color you want? So I guess she's asking about the process.
The process is, I guess I don't understand the question totally.
Yeah. Doing color over color, does that mean you have to predict the color?
Yes, you have to know, yes, you have to know what you're going to get, because the colors are mixing in all the unwaxed areas. So it takes a lot of experimenting and practice.
Plus, batik is not like we're dyeing cloth. We're not painting in acrylics in which you can cover up layer over layer.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting with white, and we're going through a logical light to dark sequence. and putting wax on each tank to preserve the color you want to keep. So if you've got yellow and you dye blue, you're going to get green. If you do red over green, you're going to get brown. If you do blue over, and so on, you've got to know color theory.
Yeah, you have to know. And another thing with doing batik on cloth like we do, I mean, the sign of a really well executed batik is that it looks the same front and back.
Wow.
In fact, we didn't have this photo. We didn't have the photo up on this slideshow, but Jonathan did one, and very good portrait of his.
It's actually hanging on the wall behind now.
We can see it. But anyway,
but when I got the wax off, I could still see the pencil line. So I didn't know what to do. So I flipped it around to the back, which looked exactly like the front, except in reverse. It was perfectly clean. I fudged the signature and put a signature on the right way around, and it's always been shown back to front.
Yeah.
So this kind of goes, I guess, with that same question. Heidi wanted to know, so do you work backwards from the end result you have in mind, or do you decide the colors as you go? So how do you decide? Like, do you have to have an overall vision and work backwards?
We do. Okay, so a lot of this time spent on these is with the drawing and the planning, because when we're done with the drawing, it looks like a paint by number, because we have labeled everything. We've separated all the colors and labeled every single one. So if you have 4 greens in a piece, you've got G1, G2, G3, G4, and that's how we.
I brought this along just to show. This is a batik I just finished, a landscape, with the wax still on, and you can clearly see the sequence: light to dark. And if you look closely, I dare say you can see the numbering in the pencil line still. I'm not sure. But I like to number to know. I get very confused in the middle. It gets, it gets darker and darker, and you don't know what you've got. And I do like to kind of plan it carefully and just work my way through.
Yeah. And I think you always have to plan when you're doing the representational paintings. You always have to plan ahead. I mean, I like to play around within that, so it's not that rigid, but you do need a good plan, because once you've dyed it too dark, it's really hard to reverse. Once you've waxed something, it's really hard to back up and reverse, and so you really have to know what you're doing.
Okay.
Also, the thing about batik, and one of the pitfalls is if you spill wax where you shouldn't on the cloth, you kind of have to live with it. You can't just take the wax off; it penetrates the cloth. Even if you scrape it off and re-dye, it's still going to show. So
it's kind of unforgiving.
It's an absolute kind of art.
Mm-hmm.
So Stephanie says, first of all, she says your work is stunning, both the images you frame and the techniques and color work. And then she says, I feel like art museums rarely show batik as exhibitions. And do you agree? Do they consider your work to be textile art, so it gets pigeonholed? And what do you think curators make of your work?
I showed my work at the Textile Museum in DC maybe 25 years ago. So, I mean, batik in the right circles, batik is highly rated.
But it's usually
fine art.
Thought of as a craft, a soft craft, and a woman's craft,
like crocheting or origami.
There have been times, a long time ago, when I would enter shows, and of course, you have to pick your category, and sometimes I wasn't really clear on what category I should pick. And then I was told a couple times, well, you have a category problem. And I'm thinking, do I have a category problem, or do you? And we're trying to cross the line into fine art, instead of it being a craft, because you always think of, doing, Grateful Dead t-shirts and things like that as batik. And people
tie-dye batik get very tied in together. Mm-hmm. This is actually the year of batik right now, in which we're making a serious effort to promote, publicize, legitimize batik as an important art and ancient art medium. There are shows on all over the world. There are workshops all over the world. We're making a really strong effort to to give it the recognition that it deserves as an art medium.
Okay, so someone else asked how much time to dry in between each color.
Well, here in Colorado, it's really fast usually, and sometimes we use the blow dryer, but that does dictate how long things take. Many times, most of the time, we have 2 or 3 pieces going at a time. That way, when one is drying, we could be working on another one. I remember when we were living in the UK, I couldn't get my batiks dry. I would think, oh, I'll kind of hang it near the fire here. I'll be able to work on it in the morning. It would still be wet. So it is helpful to be here in a dry climate.
We hang stuff out on the line outside in the garden and dry it in the sun. We have 300 days of sun in Colorado a year. So it isn't actually a problem, but we, as Beth says, we work on a few at the same time so we can keep working continually.
Because you want that dye to sit. You can't, you've got to let the dye sit and
So is it a matter of hours?
And do its thing.
So can it dry like in an hour, or is it 2 hours, or
an hour in good sun?
10 yeah, I mean you have to, and you have to rinse. And so we rinse it too. So we let the dye stay on, and then we rinse it and then dry it, and then we're able to work on it again. So it's slow.
Okay.
It's a slow process. It isn't like action painting where you can splatter all over the place, or even acrylics where you can do it fast. It's a slow, deliberate, I always say not medium, process as much as anything.
We just have a comment here from Peggy. Said she started batik in 1975 with the same approach as yours, immersion dyeing light to dark, but your batiks are magnificent, especially including adding ombre shading and other techniques. And then also wanting to know, Michael wanted to know, do you design fabrics for quilters to use?
We do.
We have a few. Every year I do a batch of fat quarters for quilters. I don't do a lot, and we usually sell out, and then I don't know, we get so busy in the summer I can't do anymore. But we always do have a batch.
We take orders. Any quilters out there, you want some Betty fat quarters, we'll do them.
And someone wanting to know if you know Ricky Timms, who's an art quilter in
close friend.
He is a close friend. Okay.
He was our neighbor.
Yeah, they said he lives near you in Colorado, so they were, but yeah. So I think we had questions about thumbnail sketches, and I think we answered that. I'm just trying to look through. Oh, we have one other question that came via my email. Hang on, let me get it up here. And then I think, this person, Mark wants to know, says they've seen the examples of the beautiful batik shown in your book and realizing it's only a fraction of the artwork that you have created over the years. What's the most difficult aspect of creating your masterpieces? And how long does your most complex work take from start to finish, say a portrait or a nature scene?
Well, masterpieces is a debatable point, Mark. I think maybe I know you, Mark. I have never achieved a masterpiece or perfection, but I try every single time. It's a slow process. Sometimes they take a week or even 2 weeks or more to do a really complex piece, like a portrait. Usually I'm so insecure if I'm doing a portrait, I do 2 versions of it and hope that one hits. Same with, I mean, you're slow. I mean, we are slow.
It's not an art that you can rush. And like I said, I think maybe it starts with me getting the subject matter, and whether it's a photograph or coming up with something in my head to do. So it starts with that, and then the drawing. And the drawing takes a long time because it's more than one drawing. Then we have to do the drawing on the cloth. And so that's
then sequence the colors
and sequencing it, and and mistakes happen, and so yeah. It's a very slow process. It takes a lot of patience. It's not.
So someone else who's done batik wants to know, how do you get your dark black so black?
We've been asked.
That's our secret. Whoever you are, I'm not going to tell you. It's the hardest color to get.
It is very hard to get, yes.
Sometimes I leave a piece in black dye immersed for days to get that black color.
And I think also we sometimes have to start over again. It doesn't always work the first time. Another thing that I do is, instead of actually using black dye, is, let's say I've ended up with the last color before the black being brown. I use a dark navy because you can get a brilliant black, dark navy over brown. So those little tricks.
There's another question.
Okay, someone also wants to know, do you create a color thumbnail sketch? So you create a thumbnail sketch for the colors?
Sometimes.
Yes, I would say sometimes.
Sometimes we're kind of winging it a bit.
Yeah.
It sounds like we're very structured, and it isn't quite as structured as that. We do wing it with the colors, because you can put a blue on, and if it's a turquoise blue rather than a cobalt blue, everything that follows is going to be slightly different, and it's slightly unpredictable.
It's a little unpredictable, and we do a lot of underdyeing. Like if I know that I'm going to have green in an area and I'm doing like yellow, because we do some painting on too. It's not all immersion dyeing now. I try to do as much of the piece in one color as possible, and I try to immerse the whole piece in the dye whenever possible too. But to get more colors, because it is a limited palette when you're just doing immersion dyeing, I do some painting in. So I might under dye yellow somewhere where I know I'm going to have green later. So that yellow's not getting waxed, but it's all this forethought into what is going to be there later and how those colors are going to affect it all the way down the line.
And I do sometimes in my portraits, before I even I do the drawing, I do the planning, I dye in half the face perhaps with pale blue, and then do the dyes on top of it. That will give it extra depth
and it's affecting the whole thing. It's affecting it.
The blue will affect all the dyes that follow. I mean, dye, you could spend your whole life studying dyes. There's a whole art to dyeing. And these are just synthetic dyes. There are natural dyes too, which are a whole other ballgame. We haven't really got into that. I've done indigo dye, but that's all.
Yeah, no,
Dyeing the art of dyeing is a wonderful thing.
Thank you. So question for Sean. So as the designer of the book, are you also then the person who has to be concerned about how to capture the colors and make sure the colors look true on the page? So like trying to capture art, an art book must be very different than doing,
Yeah, it is. It can be a bit difficult because obviously, you don't want to mess with any of the colors of the artwork. Whatever comes through to you, you've got to try and match up the color, like reproduction wise, in terms of what the original artwork looks like to what you're getting on the screen. So if you've got your original artwork, you'll take a photograph of it. I get sent the photograph, and you've got to make sure that what you're getting is pretty accurate as to what it looks like. And that's where we, send back proofs. You'll get proofs to go back to Jonathan and to Beth, and they'll be able to see, and they can always tell, listen, that color might be a little bit off or not. But the printers did a great job. I thought that they did a fantastic job in getting all the colors right. And in terms of the colors and stuff, like I said initially, I try not to mess with the artworks. I try not to mess with the heroes of the page or the artworks. So I try not to add in more colors and try and make the design look any different. The design should be quite simple, because I believe the artwork should be the things that jump out, and those are the things that should really kind of be the heroes on the page.
Yeah.
So, I think you really achieved that. I mean, I think I have my copy of the book, and I was looking at it, and just the artwork really pops out from the page, and then Ethan and the stories alongside it. If you haven't had a chance on the call, I mean, we do have a copy of this book. If you're local, we do have a copy in the Princeton Public Library collection getting cataloged. But if not, you can also, of course, contact. Somebody also had one last question here that says, Batik is originally from Indonesia. Are they doing similar artwork as yours, or does it more still just in the traditional style in Indonesia? So I was taken by that. How many of your paintings, I was amazed that they were batik, because I would never have thought of batik looking like a painting. But so are they still doing just the traditional style in Indonesia, or are they heading in your direction?
Both. They do traditional style. They print often they put the wax on with wooden blocks, copper chaps. And you've seen lengths of cloth in clothing, which is traditional batik. But there are many very creative, beautiful art batikas in Bali and Java, especially Yogyakarta. very wonderful art is done there. But somehow the Europe came to Europe and it got filtered through Europe sensibilities and Europe art history and tradition. And it's come now to America and it's changed. We've moved on. It has become something new, I think, what we're doing.
I mean, I think we revere the Indonesian artists, and I'm astounded by the work that they do.
Technically, fabulous.
But I feel like, that's not where I've come from with it. And so that's why we have not talked about it. We talk about it some in the book. You live there, so you have more of a connection with that than I do.
Also, I mean, our subject matter is, Beth's doing pointillist still lifes and trees and pointillism and divisionism. I do cars. I love cars, antique classic cars. And I've never seen anything like that coming from Asia. It's definitely a Western approach
but
to
I think maybe
subject matter.
We are traditional in the fact that we do it on cloth.
Yeah.
And we use wax and we use dye.
We are traditional. The
a lot of
technique
people
is
are taking
traditional.
batik in all kinds of directions.
There's paper batik going on now, which I don't rate for a moment, I'm afraid. It's a controversial subject and I should shut up. But for me, batik, we're traditional batik because we work on cloth using dyes and wax in the old way. And we use these tools, chantings. I brought some along just to show you how different they all are.
Enchanting spelled T-J-A-N-T.
T-J-A-N-T-I-N-G.
Yes.
Here's the traditional Javanese, Indonesian chanting, bamboo, very light. We can't use these because they work holding the cloth in the hand, women vertically, and then they work like this. When I do it, I'm working on the flat. I scoop up my wax, it collects under here and it drips down here. So I can't use these. We use the modern streamlined chantings always.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some people call them canting, C-A-N-T-I-N-G-S. But I think it used to always be chanting.
I say chanting.
A-N-T-I-N-G.
Yeah.
Okay, well, our time here is just about up. Again, I am so glad that we were able to set this up and to promote this beautiful artwork book. Just one quick question for Ethan. As the publisher, did you have to go to a different publisher to get, I mean, because it's such a beautiful art book, and I know most of your other books are, a more traditionally published memoir or biography. Like, so did you have where did you get them printed? Was it in the USA? Did you have to find a unique printer for this book?
Well, I'm really glad you asked because I wanted to pick up on what Sean said about how good a job the printer did. It was a company called Publication Printers in Denver, and we decided that we needed to do a print run. There was no, it needed to be a proper print run with a professional printer that would be able to guarantee the quality of both the paper and the colors. And that was really, really important to Jonathan and Beth and to all of us. I'm sure there are other printers around America that are as good as Publication Printers, but I went with them because they're in Denver.
Yeah,
we couldn't find one in Colorado Springs is closer to them, but to Jonathan and Beth, but there wasn't a suitable printer there. And what sold me on them was that on their website it says they're the official printer of the Denver Broncos. So
we had to go with them.
I figured NFL teams don't mess around with the quality of their printing. So
that's right.
And they did a really good job. Beth and Jonathan late in the game they upped the quality of they requested a higher quality of paper, and especially a higher quality of paper for the cover, and it turned out really, really well.
It did pay off.
I think
it's a nice book. The whole feel of it's nice, and paper's good, color's good. It's a nice book.
It's a beautiful book. And I think, also what's very unique about this book is, we have Ethan in Seattle doing the editing. We have Sean in, South Africa doing the layout. We have you in Colorado, giving all the input. This kind of collaboration would not have been possible not too long ago. Right. We were even talking about how we can have this kind of seminar today on Zoom. And so I think it just shows, the globalization and how it's so wonderful that we can work across borders and work across distance in this way in creating and creating books and creating unique works.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have everybody say goodbye and close down our Zoom call for today. And so glad to have been here. We had a great crowd on here. This is going to go up on the library's YouTube channel, which is just youtube.com/PrincetonPL. Usually takes us about a week to get things edited and put up. So once it's up, I will send the link out to anybody on here, but you can also just start checking. So you can share it with your families and friends that maybe couldn't be here today, who might want to watch the replay of today. So thank you, Sean. I know it's late over in South Africa. Thank you for joining us. And thank you, Ethan and Beth and Jonathan. This has just been a pure delight to meet you both and get to know your work in this way. So
Yep, likewise.
okay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much,
so much.
Janie.
It was a
You're
wonderful
wonderful.
opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks.
Thanks, Ethan. We'll talk. Bye,
Yep.
guys.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you all.
Bye, everybody. Thank you, everybody, for coming.